Hello everyone, it's Niesha Davis here, LCSW, and this is Motivational Masterpiece. I am a therapist. However, this is not a substitute for therapy. If you are in need of a therapist, I encourage you to reach out and get some help. There are so many platforms available out there for you to find a therapist that is the best fit for you. It's okay not to be okay. And if you are in that space and you've been in that space a little bit too long, that means that you need to reach out and get help. So I am here to encourage you, to validate you, and support you in getting help with whatever it is that you're going through. If this is your first time joining me on this YouTube channel, thank you for joining me. If you have not liked already, I encourage you to like this video, subscribe to this channel, and share it with a friend, as you will not be disappointed. Motivational Masterpiece is just a space for you to come learn some coping strategies, coping tools, and techniques to help you as you experience this thing called life. We all go through challenges and we all experience things. However, sometimes we just need that extra support. Sometimes we need to be validated, and sometimes we need to just know that, okay, you know what? I'm in a tough space right now, and I just need a little push, or I just need a little support to help me get through this. So as you tune in to Motivational Masterpiece, I am hoping that you get the support and techniques that you need just to encourage you and to help you as you continue to navigate the feelings that you experience through life. If you joined me last time, I introduced to you guys my new book, Your Story Does Not Define You, A Healing Journey Through Trauma Through Expression and Self-Affirmation. So today, I just thought it would be a great idea for me to get on here and just expand on what trauma is and helping you to identify your trauma. Now, I talked a little bit about last time about trauma and exactly what trauma is. And I gave you guys a little bit of definition of what trauma really is. Now, I know some people equate trauma to something that was catastrophic that happened to them. Again, people equate trauma to sexual abuse, physical abuse, domestic violence, witnessing a disturbing incident that happened to somebody that they know or a loved one. So today I just want to go into a little bit more depth in regards to the definition of trauma. Now, if we look at trauma, trauma is basically like a deep, disturbing feeling or response to something that's terrible that happened to somebody. So it could be something that actually happened to you. It could be something that happened to somebody else. It could be something that was generational, that was passed down from your ancestors or your family members. But anything that has caused you an emotional response to something that was very disturbing or something that was distressing that happened to you or somebody else. Now, when I talk about disturbing and distressing, I just mean like an emotional response where your feelings changed, where you were affected by whatever that situation is in some form or fashion, where it caused you to think different, it caused you to feel different, or it caused you to behave different. So basically just change your view of life on people and even sometimes against God, if that is your religious belief. Trauma shifts the way that you shifts the way that you think and the way that you feel about people, things, and places. So when we talk about trauma, one of the things that I want you guys to remember is that it doesn't mean that it has to be like some type of sexual abuse, some type of emotional abuse, or some type of domestic violence. That doesn't always categorize trauma. It doesn't have to always be something catastrophic, but it can be something that to you was very disturbing or very distressful to you, and it affected you emotionally. But to somebody else, they may not have had the same response. So I want you to know that whatever your trauma might be, it may not be the same as somebody else's. And if you shared your story with somebody and they feel like, you know what, you're being irrational with your thinking, I want to validate your feelings and tell you that no, you are not being irrational with your thinking, because if you were affected emotionally and you begin to feel and think different about something or someone, that is trauma. That is trauma. And so I want you to learn how to identify what your trauma is, because in order for you to do the work, you have to identify what that trauma is. That is the first step in the healing journey, is being able to identify your trauma, being honest and transparent with yourself and say, you know what? This has been a traumatic situation for me, or this is something that has affected the way that I feel and think about a person, about a thing, or even again about God. So I want you to take some time, and I really want you to think about it. It may not happen today, it may not happen tomorrow, but I want you to pay attention. Pay attention to what your body is saying to you. Because when you have experienced trauma in some form or fashion, your body sends you signals. There's a book out there that talks about how your body keeps the score. And that is so true, because our bodies sends us signals to tell us when we're going to be triggered or if we do get triggered. So as I've mentioned before, trauma lives in our bodies. And what that just means is that when something affects us, or if we begin to feel a certain kind of feeling or emotion, we have a response that is given out by our body. We may become anxious, may become really nervous, we may begin to get scared, we might get paranoid, we might begin to sweat. Anything, your body will send signals to you when you are being triggered in some way or fashion. So I want you to pay attention to what your body is telling you. So if something happened to you previously, so for example, if you were previously in a domestic abusive relationship and you got out of that relationship, and just say, for example, you're having a conversation with somebody, and just say in your relationship you were being physically abused. Now, you could be having a general conversation with somebody, and that somebody may be somebody that talks with their hands, right? So they might be talking to you, and they might move in a form or fashion that may trigger you or remind you of something that happened to you. So in those situations, you might flinch because that is something that you would have done previously, or you might get really anxious and nervous, as I mentioned before, because again, remember, our bodies keep the score. Trauma lives in our bodies, and we are affected by the things that happen to us, by the things that we see. It affects the way that we feel emotionally. So again, if we think about trauma, there's typically 3 types of trauma: acute, chronic, and complex. So when we think about acute trauma, that is something that has happened one time, that we've only experienced something, a single episode of whatever it may be. That's acute trauma. Chronic trauma is something that has happened repeated times. So example, somebody that has been physically abused by a parent, parent-child relationships, or a domestic violence relationship, and it has happened multiple times for a prolonged period of time. That is considered chronic trauma. Complex trauma is something that has happened several times, but not just one thing, multiple events of different things. That is complex trauma. So that could be you experience a catastrophic event. That could have been you have also experienced some type of physical abuse. That could be you have experienced generational trauma, which is just basically trauma that has been passed down through the generations of your family. It's multiple things that have happened to you over many periods of time. Now again, trauma is not something that just happened to you, but it also could be something that has happened to someone that we love or someone that we know, and it affected us, the way that we feel and or think. We might be mad at God because we lost a loved one in our family, maybe a parent, maybe a child, maybe someone that we really cared about. Maybe it was due to an accident, or maybe it was due to a sudden death or sudden sickness, and we don't understand why God chose to take our loved ones. That affected us in some form or fashion. It affected the way that we feel, it affected the way that we think, and it definitely affected the way that we might feel about God, because we don't understand, why did this have to happen to our loved one? That is trauma. That didn't directly happen to us, but it happened to somebody that we know. Another example is, if you were in a relationship with your parents growing up, maybe your parent was on drugs, maybe your parent was not mentally able to or physically able to take care of you. Maybe they didn't really know how to parent correctly like the way you thought they did. Maybe they called you out your name when you did something wrong. Maybe they said you're stupid, or stop that, you ignorant, or you ugly, something like that. Maybe they called you out your name. At that time, you did not feel that that was traumatic to you. But as time went on, and as that may have happened to you repeatedly, and you got older, those situations affect you. And what happens with trauma is that when we don't address it, and we don't begin to take the healing journey, and we don't admit what our trauma is, we cannot completely heal from it. So the purpose of today's video is just to encourage you and help you to identify what the trauma is. Now, this is something that you're going to have to do individually. You may be thinking like, maybe I did never experience trauma. You may think that maybe I did experience trauma, but it really doesn't affect me the way that it affects other people. And if that's the case, that's okay. Whatever your situation is, you deal with it, you handle it different than other people. And if for some reason you were really affected by your traumatic experience, it doesn't mean that you are less than anybody else. It doesn't mean that your trauma was not valid because maybe it didn't help, maybe it didn't affect you. Maybe you were more resilient than somebody else. And if you were, again, your trauma is still valid. So I just want to challenge you today. Identify whatever those traumatic experiences are in your life that you have been affected by personally, or that you have witnessed, or that has affected somebody else you know. Maybe you were bullied in school, and back then you just kind of got over it. But maybe some of those same feelings that you felt in school still affect you to this day. Again, that is trauma. So this is a space where you guys can actually do the work. So when you guys purchase Your Story Does Not Define You, in the first chapter, I pretty much talked to you about identifying whatever that situation may be. If you want to heal from trauma, you have to first identify that you have experienced trauma, and your views of life, your views of God, your views of other people have been shifted and have been changed because of whatever the situation that you have dealt with. Even though you've been resilient, sometimes things can lie dormant until certain situations will shake the foundation, and it will bring those things alive again. And when that happens, you have to deal with that. You have to deal with that because it causes an emotional response to you. It affects the way you feel, it affects the way you think, and it affects the way that you interact with other people. So my goal as a trauma therapist is just to help you identify what trauma is and how do you begin to do the work? How do you begin to heal from the things that have happened to you? First and foremost, the first step is identifying your trauma. And that is my assignment for you today, is learn how to identify your trauma. We definitely will dive into other things as time goes on, but first and foremost, I want to help you to learn how to identify your trauma. So whenever you get the chance, I want you to take some time, grab a notebook, write some things down, write some notes down. I really want you to think about your life specifically and things that have happened to you, whether you felt like you were resilient or not. I want you to write those things down. Just write them down, because at some point, we'll begin to connect the dots. And when I say that, it's just helping you bring things together, put things into perspective, and helping it make sense. So for now, that is your assignment. Work on learning how to identify your trauma, because I feel that we all have been affected by things in some way or fashion. I have experienced trauma in my life, and I know that there was a point in my life where I had to identify, I had to admit, this is what happened to me, or this affected me, and I had to learn how to do the work. I had to begin to heal and be able to move past that. And again, as a trauma therapist, I am here to help you. I am here to help you do the work. I am here to validate you and to let you know that whatever happened to you, whether you've talked about it, whether you shared it, or whether you have not, your feelings and emotions are valid. And whatever you think happened to you, it did happen to you. However you feel about what happened to somebody else, you can feel those feelings, and it's okay for you to feel the way that you feel. But at some point, I do want you to learn to do the work. I want you to heal from it, because you are not a victim. You are a victor, and you are so much more than what happened to you or what happened to somebody else. So until next time, remember, you got this. I'm here to support you. I'm here to validate you. Leave me some comments. Leave me some questions. Is there anything that maybe you're a little confused about that you need help navigating through? Is there anything that you want me to talk about specifically in regards to your individual trauma? Leave me a comment down below. Let me know. Again, I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you get through this. And until next time, remember, you got this.